I keep restarting this video and I keep saying I'm no movie reviewer and I keep taking a very tactful your mileage may vary approach. But I just want to be completely honest and say that out there's a 7-year-old me whose heart is absolutely breaking. Lucy and I went to see the Ghostbusters reboot. Originally, we'd both had fairly high hopes for the idea of a reboot. And then the trailer came along, which wasn't great. And I know both of us, but particularly Lucy, still held out hope that it wouldn't be as bad as the trailer. Maybe they just used bad takes or bits that weren't so funny in the trailer because they wanted to save the best bits for the movie. My 7-year-old self is sobbing his eyes out there somewhere for what's happened to the whole franchise that he loved and lived throughout his childhood. Let me just start by saying the reason that I hate this movie has nothing to do with the fact that the leads are women. It has nothing to do with disliking anyone who's worked on or starred in the movie. It's got nothing to do with being such a big fan of the original and not giving the new one a chance. The film sucks. This is my personal opinion. And if you like the movie, I'm really pleased. I don't want everybody to believe that Ghostbusters is bad as a franchise. If you enjoyed it, I'm really pleased for you. I would ask that you stop watching this review because I don't think you're going to get anything out of it. Ghostbusters was one of those things. My obsessions. We all have them. We all had them. I think all kids have something that they cling on to. And Ghostbusters was one of mine. It was part of an elite crowd. There was Ghostbusters, Gremlins, Mary Poppins, Alice in Wonderland. They were the 4 films that, of their time, I watched on a daily basis. Once I'd watched them once, I watched them every single day for months and months and months. Ghostbusters was aired on Boxing Day when I was 7. And my dad recorded it on an old VHS cassette. And I watched that VHS cassette every day until eventually I think my dad recorded over it. I lived Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters was one of the pieces of flotsam and jetsam that were floating on the top of the cesspool that was my childhood, where I was so bogged down with depression and despair of all the horrible things that were happening around me at school and at home, and all the people who were pulling me down. I was clinging on to this one thing to keep me going. I was a Ghostbuster. I was a Ghostbuster in 2 ways. I had my own proton pack that I made from a Weetabix packet with the inside of a toilet roll held together with a piece of string. I had a trap made from a shoebox that I was really proud of. It even had its own little pedal made with the lid of a coffee jar. I also even set up my own group of Ghostbusters in my class at school. Now, I was bullied throughout my school life and I never had any friends at school until I was about 15. This was the first time that these 2 girls had spoken to me because they'd watched Ghostbusters as well, and we formed our own Ghostbusters group. We were the Young People's Phenomena and UFOs group. I had a folder and everything and a little badge that I'd made. We tried to investigate ghosts in our school and we didn't find any. But 10 years on from that, I used the same maps I had in my ghost folder to try and actually investigate a haunting at the art college that I was at the time. I lived through that movie. I had all the toys, I watched the cartoon, I got the comics, and earlier this year I got to live through them all again, watching the first 2 movies. And this time I got to take my best friend with me. As for the 3rd movie, my best friend was sitting there right beside me, so we clung to each other, turned to one another and asked, how can it be this bad? And I genuinely want to know the answer to that. Who fucked up? The editing was so sloppy. There were several occasions where somebody slightly fluffed their lines, and instead of using a different take, they used the bad take. It was like watching the first Doctor's episodes of Doctor Who, where they couldn't just refilm, so they had to use the bit with the fluff in. The editing in general was just poor. The continuity was atrocious. The scenes didn't fit together. A lot of the music was out of place. The effects were terrible. A couple of the ghosts were very good. However, they spoilt them by putting too much of the old strobe lighting in. There was so much of this fluorescence darting about all over the screen that you couldn't actually see the ghosts. And I think a lot of that was to do with the fact that they were trying to hide what was actually going on. This was particularly prevalent during the big sequence near the end. Most of that action was made up of these fluorescent lights darting across the screen left, right and centre. You couldn't really see what was going on. You couldn't see the ghosts and you couldn't see the human actors. It was very hard to follow some of the action and to know exactly what was going on. You missed a lot of things because there was so much of this strobe lighting. It was like waking up in the middle of the 90s, in the middle of a rave. Then there was the fact that the humour was absolutely piss poor. I've not seen the director's other movies, but I don't think I'd like them because I don't think I would like his kind of humour. It just doesn't strike a chord with me. So I was prepared that some of the jokes wouldn't be my kind of thing anyway. But the delivery of the humour was such that you couldn't quite tell whether it had been a joke or not. There were a few times when there was a weird laugh from the audience, and it wasn't even like a proper laugh. It was like quite a forceful laugh, like they were trying to project. Those people who were laughing were trying to make up for the whole audience, of which quite a lot of us were just sat there wondering why we were sitting through this really shitty film. Some of the jokes just weren't our kind of thing. There were a lot of poo jokes. There were also a lot of jokes that were just sentences that didn't make any sense. A lot of jokes that were made up of somebody says something that the other characters don't understand, so then they question them about it and it gets worse from there. But it's not done in a funny way. It's not done in a humorous way. It's done in a frustrating way. It's done in a, oh, what are you talking about? Just shut up and get on with some plot in this movie. Because that's the other thing. It wasn't just that it was lacking in proper jokes, but it was lacking in plot. It was so two-dimensional. The characters were very two-dimensional. Even if they're just kind of throwaway, fantasy, light-hearted movies where you don't want to have to think too hard, you just want to go there for the experience and to enjoy it, the characters still give you reasons to love or hate them. All the characters just gave us a reason to meh. That was about it. The villain didn't really have a good standard reason for wanting to destroy the city. There was this vague thing about, oh, people have bullied me, so now I will get my revenge. That's all we really know. We didn't really see a proper glimpse into his background. Who had bullied him? Was he going to focus on those people? No. He was just planting these devices into various locations around the city. Woo, spooky ghost comes out, lots of flashing lights, back to a rave in the middle of the 90s. That was it. He told us his evil plan within about the first 5 seconds of the movie. We didn't buy that he was aiming his fury in the right way at the right people. Bad guys are great. Bad guys are the best. I love bad guys. Even lame bad guys can be funny. You can sympathise still with them. But this guy had nothing. He had nothing except his master plan and the fact that he had apparently been bullied, and then you heard somebody slightly bad-mouthing him and having a bit of a go. I wanted to know how far back it stemmed, how he'd gotten to this point, whether he was going to set these ghosts on the people who had bullied him. Even if he'd have been talking to some ghost and saying, right, you, Mr. Ghost, go over there, go and attack that teacher that gave me 20 lines and made me do pee in my underpants when I was 10. At least that would have been a reason, an actual specific reason and a focus. But it wasn't. It was just someone who was a bit pissed off with society, so he was going to destroy the city. Then there's the whole fact of how they figured out his evil plot. We knew because he couldn't wait to tell us. They found some bits of some of these devices and then it's like, hey, wasn't there another one here? And hey, look, there's this guy, he's in a picture here, and suddenly we know everything. And that's basically what happened. We kind of whispered to each other, I can't believe how bad this is, or is this really happening? And in those moments, we seem to have missed the entire arc of how they discovered that it was this guy who had been bullied and he'd gone to all these places and done all these things. It just seemed to happen like that. I think that they'd actually gone and watched the movie so that they'd seen his evil speech and then knew what he was going to do, because there's no other explanation for how they could have found it all out so fast. There was no fun of the chase. It was just like, alright, we're already there. It was force-fed to us with a fucking shovel. Fucking bulldozer, in fact. Just, here you go, let me just scrape up all the pieces of this movie and just give to you here. Right, let's go straight from the beginning of the movie to the bit where they know everything. None of the characters had any heart to them or any soul. They had nothing aside from, as Lacey put it, their 2 plot devices each that they were allowed. And that was about it. I don't know any of their names, so for purposes of this video, I shall refer to the one with the straight kind of mid-brown hair as the boring one. She was in love with the stupid guy that they had employed as their receptionist. She vaguely had the only real backstory about a ghost who appeared at the bottom of her bed for, I can't remember if it was 1 year or 10 years. So, as you can see, the plot really did make an imprint on my mind, even when they were actually trying to flesh it out. That was the one part where they tried to put any emotion into it, and because it was one solitary moment in an entire movie that was basically a walking poo joke and a bulldozer and a mid-90s rave, it fell flat because it was so out of place. I wanted to believe that she'd been deeply affected by this ghost. I wanted that sad, haunted look on her face to mean something. But even she didn't seem to really buy it, because she wasn't really that character in that moment. And I don't blame her. I don't blame any of the actresses for not being able to actually fulfill their acting potential in those roles. The only one that I thought was any good was the blonde one. The line that she delivered about the hat and the wig in the trailer was the only bit that I thought was mildly amusing. It wasn't even the line, it was the delivery, it was her. But they used a different cut in the movie that wasn't as good. She had a more vibrant character than the others. She was more believable, even though she seemed to be completely insane. She wasn't quite as two-dimensional, but her character was starting to get old quickly, because all she had was, woo, I can say all this science stuff and I've made all this technology for killing ghosts. And that's another thing, the technology. The one thing that I would have really wished that they'd stayed true to was the way that the technology worked. You had the proton packs. You were not allowed to cross those beams unless, of course, you were dealing with Giant Marshmallow Man. You had the trap. They had a whole shop full of gadgets. By the end of it, you could punch a ghost. And you could, like, pew, pew, pew with your special funky Western style ghost guns. There was no continuity between how they worked. They didn't work in conjunction with the beams and the trap. There was no believable connection between all the different forms of technology. As for the ghost bombs, oh God, I felt like we just sat through an 1.5 hour long trailer for a sequel. It didn't feel like we watched a movie. It wasn't like actually sitting and watching a story unfold. Everything just felt substandard. The writing, the editing, the acting, I think was probably as good as it could have been. There was so much sexism. You've got the guy who I only know as Thor. He was supposed to be the eye candy that girls all fancied, and so that's why they employed him. And I mean, that joke's been done to death, actually both ways round. Sexism shouldn't still be in movies. It shouldn't still be in life, but we don't need it in movies, encouraging it elsewhere. The guy was being objectified. The girls were being made to look like complete bimbos falling apart over a guy. You don't need sexism either way around. And then The guy's character was the most frustrating and annoying character in a bad way. Every line out of that guy's mouth made no sense. It was like having a conversation with someone who was concussed. When he was being bad, he was being slack. He wasn't just being, oh, I don't know what I'm doing here. He was being a complete arsehole. He was just not bothering to do his job. He was being a lazy git. He was being subordinate. What was supposed to be the sexy dance that was playing over the end sequence, oh God. It was cringeworthy. That poor guy. That poor guy. And then, on a really personal note, having seen the awful cameos, quite near the end, Lucy drops a bombshell on me and says, there's something at the end that you're not going to like. And I braced myself and I said, what? And she said, you know how Winston was your favourite Ghostbuster? And I just froze. Poor Winston. He was my favourite Ghostbuster. I even named a tadpole at school after him. The tadpole died. And I wish that the movie had as well. Now, I struggle a lot at the moment with talking and trying to get my words out. I'm sure I've repeated myself. I've lost my thread of conversation. And believe me, I fluff what I'm saying over and over again. And yet, this review is still more coherent than the movie we just watched. It felt like it was done on the cheap. The effects, the script, the directing, the editing, everything. It's so sad. It's really genuinely sad. And I'm looking back and I'm trying to remember what actually happened in the film. And aside from a couple of things that I've mentioned, I just can't. Because there wasn't any substance to it. There was the big scene at the end, and there was the dance. What else was there? I don't remember. Oh, there was Slimer and his girlfriend. That's what he's been reduced to. At least, I hope, he got some tonight. Because he at least deserves that much. So to sum up, I'm really disappointed. Because I wanted the franchise to get a boost. I wanted it to be reborn. It's been many years since I was a Ghostbuster. It's been many years since kids ran around the playground shouting who you gonna call and trying to zap each other with imaginary proton beams. And I want a whole new generation to experience that. And it's not gonna happen. I feel really sad that it's just not gonna happen. I miss Ghostbusters. Luckily, Lucy's getting the original movie queued up for us to watch in bed. Which is where I want to be right now. To go and cry into my pillow. I know that this review is very incoherent. But as an over an emotional 7-year-old, I think you can excuse me that.